What's up, everybody? This is the Be the Difference podcast, and I'm your host, Greg Birch. This podcast is all about making you a better person in your life and in your business with coaching on sales, leadership, mindset, marketing, everything under the sun when it comes to being an entrepreneur. And we bring on guest speakers. Today, I have the honor and pleasure of welcoming Miss Marsha Vanwynsberghe. Marsha, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Very well. I appreciate
Good.
you coming on and just having a conversation with us real quick and kind of sharing your experiences.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here, honestly. And as soon as I saw the name of your podcast, I'm like, oh, I love that. Absolutely love it. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, that's great. So, a little side note, a lot of people don't know this, but I came up with the name. So my company is called Delta Financial, and it's from Delta, from the Delta symbol, the Delta sign, which is the change or the difference between two things.
Okay.
And that's why I picked the name. And so I just came up with the slogan, "Be the difference."
I love that.
After I came up with the company, and I'd already done podcasting before, and I'd done it with previous companies. And so I just rebranded my entire podcasting platform, started from scratch, but I changed it to the Be the Difference podcast. And
I
so
love it.
we're just about making an impact.
I love it. And I didn't know that the Delta, I didn't know and connect that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. So for the audience and the viewers that don't know who Marsha is, what I'm gonna do is really quickly read a little bit about our bio, and then we'll jump in. So Marsha is a storytelling neurolinguistics program trainer, or NLP trainer, speaker, publisher, and author. She's 2 times podcaster, and she is the 6-time best-selling author of When She Stopped Asking Why. She shares her lessons as a parent who dealt with teen substance abuse that tore her family unit apart. Marsha has been published 7 times, most recently with her co-platform, Everybody Holds a Story. And she is on a mission to continue to help women and men to speak, share, and publish their stories. Through her tools, outspoken NLP certification programs, coaching, and podcast, Marsha teaches the power of radical responsibility and owning your choices in your own life. She empowers people how to heal and own their stories, be conscious leaders, and build platform businesses that create a massive impact. I love everything about that, especially radical responsibility. I like extreme ownership, but radical responsibility is a great way to say it too. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. That was just it. It's funny when you hear your bio back and it's like, oh, I guess there is a lot of different pieces to it. But
Yeah.
yes, radical responsibility has been one of my words and phrases that I've used for a number of years now.
I love that concept. Let's dig in. How did this start? You know, you mentioned having the dealing with teen substance abuse that tore your family unit apart. As much as you're willing to go into it, you know, talk about what happened and how you overcame that to basically impact many people.
It's a great question, and I will do my best to keep it as succinct as possible.
Okay.
I spent 28 years working in physical rehab. So I was teaching people how to walk again after injuries and surgeries. So really, most of my life has been in the coaching area. And when we started to deal with substance abuse, it was really just, it came in. Like, you know, a lot of teens go through experiencing and experimenting, and it came in. But for us, there was never a sign that it was a phase. It literally came in and stayed and just ramped. We like to refer to it as the monster that just grew. And it didn't take long before it was recognizing that, wait, this is seriously a problem. This is affecting, you know, school, family, home, safety, jobs, sports, like it's just every single aspect. And so people say, how do you know when it's a problem? And it's like, when it starts to impact, I don't care what age you are, any substance that you're using that is impacting your daily function living, then it's a problem. And that's where we ended up going into. And so in the back end, I was doing a lot of, you know, researching and therapy and help and going to groups and trying to figure out, I think my whole mission at that point as a mom was, how do I fix this? Like, how do I fix this and how do I stop this? I think that's a normal response, is like, how do you stop what is happening and you can't seem to stop the train? Until I started to learn that I was checking all the boxes and I was doing everything that I was being asked to do. but we still had the problems, and we still had more problems. And I was like, but nothing is working. And I kept hearing, because it's not your problem to fix anymore. And as a mom, when you're dealing with minors, that is just a mind-blowing moment to think, what do you mean? I just ignore it then? I don't understand. And so I slowly started to find my way out of probably the darkest time I've ever had, and a very dark hole, and recognizing that the only thing I could control was myself. The only thing that I could change was myself. The only thing that I could manage was myself. And that's where radical responsibility came from, is recognizing that where was I, or where was I not owning my own choices?
Mhm.
And so those words became an anchor for, and a foundation for everything that I did. And it sounds like it was a very fast story. It wasn't. It was not, it wasn't at all.
I'm sure it's excruciating in those
It was
times.
excruciating. It was very ugly. It was hard to crawl through. And it just required so much daily work of, how can I take care of me? How can I pour into me? What can I do to handle what is going on in our life? And it's funny, because I spent in the beginning so much time trying to change and fix and manage everyone. And that led nowhere, absolutely nowhere. Actually, probably made it worse.
Mhm.
And then I started to figure out, how can I change myself so that I can manage what we have to deal with. And in managing myself, I reacted differently to our situation, which ultimately changed our situation.
Mhm.
So it's an interesting thing. Like, I think as humans, we like to control things, and you have to come to a point in your life when you recognize you actually have no control of anything.
Mhm.
It's like the one constant, but you can control how you choose to show up and respond. And that was the early stages of recognizing that I can take care of me, and I can control me, and I can, listen to what is my choice. And when you start to be in that space, the interesting thing that happens is that, like, if two people are trying to, as I say, own a choice, then nobody owns it. And if two people are trying to take responsibility, like, nobody takes responsibility. And so it's actually the definition of codependency. But when you start to really let go of that control, all of a sudden now the consequences of their choices they had to own. And that's where it was like, that's where some of the change had to come from. But we all have to be in that space of
Mhm.
having consequences of our own choices.
Mhm.
And yeah, and so that's really where it started from. And as I started to heal and find my voice and use it, then I would start to share it on really small platforms, like super small, because I was scared. And one of my therapists at the time said that, maybe you can't find what you're looking for because you're meant to be the person to share that and talk about it,
Mhm.
which I thought was absolutely crazy at the time. But it started to open up my eye, that eyes that I could heal and I could help others. And I also started to recognize how many people were going through their entire life with a shame story and letting it define every single aspect of what they were doing.
So many people.
Oh, it actually blew
So
me away.
it's like basically everybody.
Yes, and it blew me away, and that's where I was like, "Wait a minute here, like, this is," women saying, I would speak at an event, and it became, a joke, but my husband would try and send somebody into the washroom, because I would go to the washroom after to kinda collect myself,
Mhm.
and I'll get bombarded by women saying, like, "That's my story. 40 years I've never told a soul. 50 years," and I was just like, "This is not okay. It's not okay. We have to start to change the narrative and change shame stories, because we all have stories."
Mhm.
And that's where it slowly started to become a little bit of a movement and a little bit of a change, that we could actually connect by sharing and learning to share our stories.
This is so powerful, and I love how you had to come to that realization that you can only control yourself. And so I don't know if you've ever heard of Damon West and the
Mhm.
story of the coffee bean.
I love that story. I
So
love it.
great, isn't it? This is
So
very
good.
reminiscent of the coffee bean. It's just like,
Mhm.
and he says there's four things that you can control. You can
Mhm.
control what you think, you can control how you feel, you can control what you say, and you can control what you do. Anything outside of those four things,
So
you're
true.
wasting your energy trying
Mhm.
to control something that you cannot control, and it ends up having an adverse impact and effects in your life because you're wasting all this energy and you're not controlling yourself. And
No.
so you just end up spinning your wheels and spinning your wheels. And um the other piece of this that's really powerful is that everybody's living
Mhm.
with some kind of pain, turmoil, um, past experiences, shame, like you were saying, within themselves that it allows them to define themselves and like what their capabilities are, what actions, how they think, actions they take on a daily basis. Have you ever read the book, The Four Agreements?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
That was it. That was that was a pivotal book, to be honest. When I
yes.
first started, it was very pivotal because I started to like, when you're living through a shame story, and you're exactly right. Honestly, Greg, you're exactly right because we're all living them in some way, shape, or form. And the more we hide in our shame stories, the more we feed it,
Mhm.
and the more shame grows, the more power it has. And so that book was given to me, one of my first books. I had a couple of real pivotal ones, but that one was, and really starting to understand to stop taking everything else personally
Yeah.
because it felt like it was personal.
Yep.
Because I mean, I often say that as humans, we wonder what people are thinking or saying about us. We didn't have to wonder. We didn't have to wonder. People had no problem stopping us in the store, at
Mhm.
our front door, yelling at us like to fix it because our story scared people. Not because of it's because it scared them. That was
Yeah.
their reaction.
And for you, I'm sure that even had a greater impact to like stress out even more and be like, we got to do something. And it's like you're trying to do everything to stop that action.
Yep.
And there's something that's very powerful when you accept the thing that you're ashamed of, when you take responsibility and accountability for it, it takes away its power. But in your mind, you're like, I'm just gonna like ignore it, right? Or like it obviously we
Doesn't
think
work.
about it, we can't control it. It's always there. It's always
Yeah.
like gnawing at the edges of our mind. But when you just say, you know what, I made a mistake and I did this, and I'm gonna do better, right? And you just take that extreme accountability. What happens is that you actually take away its power, and you start to take
Mhm.
cathartic steps forward.
Mhm.
And I like in the book and the Four Agreements how he talks about how we have all of these rules or laws that we live by that are not our own, that were almost put on us by our experiences, by other people, by our parents, by teachers, by friends, whatever. And we allow those so much to define who we are that we almost like we live within a hell within our mind. Like it's like hell
Mhm.
on earth in our own mind. And that's what happens when you have that shame, when you let it to control you. It's like you're living in hell in your own mind.
Mhm.
And even I don't know, not to bring this to a religious thing, but even the Bible and Jesus talks about in Luke that the kingdom of God is within you. And so like you can find heaven on earth if you can have those positive experiences and you take control of your actions, those four things, and you
Yeah.
don't try to control anything else. You can really change and you can amplify your life in miraculous ways.
Oh, I agree with every single thing that you've said, and I think that that's a big piece of it, especially if there's a parent that's listening or even a spouse, right? Like we get through this mindset that we are here to manage, control, fix everyone, and you're not allowing them the opportunity to create change in their life. And so ironically, that's what had to happen is that like we all had to take responsibility for ourselves. Now that also means that I mean, I'm human. There are times where I will find myself not proud of my behavior and sitting in a space of going, I'm frustrated with everyone and I'm angry and I'm this. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, Marsha, where are you not owning your own choices right now? Where are you not taking responsibility for yourself? Like, you have to carve that time out for you. It's your responsibility to do it.
Mhm.
And I think that's really powerful because Like no one's coming. Like no one's coming. It's up for us to create that change. And that means that there's a lot of times that it's easy to fall back into the patterns of doing everything for everyone else and then being resentful that you don't have a stitch of time left for yourself when actually you were the one that said yes to everybody in the first place. So
Yeah.
I really had to learn a lot about, myself and boundaries and what I say yes and no to, and feeling this level of like I've disappointed people because, in those times when you're dealing with something like that, again, our story scared a lot of people. I had people coming to me and saying, like, what am I supposed to tell everybody about how your family's behaving? Like, this looks poorly on us. And I'm like, oh my God, like I can't take the pressure of everyone else too. So I got a lot better at saying, you know what, that's not my problem. That's not my problem. That's not my problem. But this is what I'm putting my energy on.
Mhm.
And you're so proud of yourself when you make those steps, and you could also like upset a whole lot of people in the process
Yeah.
because you're disrupting as they say, the only people who are frustrated when you put boundaries in place are the people who were able to succeed from you not having them in the first place. So a lot of things, it felt like, if I look at it in that time in our life, a lot of things blew up. Like a lot of things blew up, personal friendships, personal relationships. And I feel like I've done so much healing now in the sense that I'm not angry at any of that. All of that had to happen in order to get to this space now
Mhm.
where I feel like so much more content and calm in, my nervous system, in my own body, and taking responsibility for myself. It doesn't mean we don't have problems. It doesn't mean we don't have challenges. Like it's not a miraculous like story where we're fairy tale and everything is perfect and easy and good. It's not.
Mhm.
And that's all the more reason to keep doing the work every single day
Yep.
because challenges keep coming every day.
But you get more adept at handling the challenges. They don't throw you off of your game so quickly. There's almost like it's a momentum that builds, and it's almost
Mhm.
like I was explained to me one time something similar, but it's like a hockey stick, right?
Mhm.
So it starts off at the base, at the bottom of the hockey stick, at this slow momentum, but as you do it more and more, it starts to skyrocket, and you get better
Mm.
and better and better. And like you said, the challenges still come,
Mhm.
they just don't affect or impact you. It's like water off of a duck's back almost. As long as you continue to just do the daily action, you stay in that mindset
Mhm.
that helps you to overcome or just basically just be like, not my problem. Like I'm not even going to pay any attention to it.
Such
Uh,
a great analogy. Can I share it? I often say that in the beginning, the things that would like take me out at the knees and knock me down for a week because I'd be like so afraid to show back up again, they're like speed bumps now. They
yes.
happen. I lose my footing. I, maybe fall over, maybe trip. And it's like, oh, wait, oh, Marsha, you know better than that. Like and so that's where you have to celebrate the growth, right? And that can take a lot of time. But that you're exactly right. It's that what takes you out in the beginning just becomes a little bit of a speed bump now.
Yeah, and you just get better, more adept, honestly, over time.
Mhm.
And I'm willing to bet that as you started and you revamped your strategy and you're like, you know what, I'm going to start, I'm going to let go of trying to control the family unit, and I'm just going to control myself. I'm willing to bet that you started to make some changes, and even your energy, like everything
Mhm.
became a little bit more positive. That right there impacted and influenced change in the people around you because they saw what you were doing and they're like, I want that.
Mhm.
I,
Yeah, that's actually a great question. That's a great statement. I've come across people who I knew back when I was younger, and they're like, "You're a totally different person now." And I'm
yeah.
like, "I know, isn't it good? Like, it's so much
Like,
because that
yes.
old me was not going to survive. She wasn't. She was not going to survive long term." And so, yes, exactly. That all of those things start to change.
Yeah. And it's a very, it's enlightening because I think the best way to put it is like you realize that you're like, oh man, all I had to do was start bettering myself, and then people wanted to follow that instead of me telling people, hey, do this and you'll get better, right? Do
Mhm.
this, do this, do that, you'll get better, and then no one does it, and then you're like, well, I'm just gonna do it, and then people would just be like, hey, what are you doing? Well, follow my lead, and here we go.
Yep,
And it's
exactly.
powerful because you're not telling anyone to do anything. You're showing, you're being like with your own actions. You know, you're being a true leader. of leading from the front, doing the actions on a daily basis, and people can feel it. People can feel the energy, and they can just kind of sense like you're. The same thing happened with me when I started my personal development journey back in 2021. Is I had a lot of challenges and issues, and then I just kind of skyrocketed, and people would see like, dude, you're like a different person than you used to be. Like, just
No.
like a different energy.
It's so true though. It's so true. And it is work. It's so much work, but I'm
Mhm.
telling you it's worth it. And people don't always like that answer because we want something that can fix it, right? We want something like if I just buy this or if I just do this or that book or this meditation, it's all going to fix it. And it might be a factor that helps, but it's still everything comes from inside. It's like we're the I be the difference. Like I still wear on my wrist every day. It's like be the change because that's my reminder that when I'm frustrated with something, my question is are you being the change that you wish to see? And that's up to us. That's our responsibility.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm,
So you went through this journey, and
mhm.
you started to have this metamorphosis, this transformation, and then you're like, you know what, I want to share this with people. So you started, you said, on a small stage, or a small platform. Like walk us through that. Like, what platform did you do it? How did you start? What was the impact, and how did you grow? How did you scale that?
Oh, this is such a great question. And I can say that I'm grateful for the challenge because I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing today. But if the me of 7 years ago could see what I'm doing today, it would have scared the crap out of her. She probably would have stopped.
Yeah.
And so, as humans, we want to see the big picture, but we're not supposed to because most of us, until we can actually do that work on ourselves, will self sabotage the success because we don't feel worthy of it.
Mhm.
And so, back
That's a great
then,
point. That's a great point.
yeah, it's just and it's my reminder because I'm still a how person, right? I get stuck in like, what do I do next or how does this look? And it's like, wait, you didn't have a clue 7 years ago and you still just did it anyway. So can you just stay in that energy? And so I found myself, I was very open in a lot of areas. I was open with the school. I was letting the schools, we were having open conversations about what was going on. I had been very open with police, with counselors, and one of the people at the school had asked, would you consider coming in and speaking to a couple of parents? Because she said, like, we don't know what to tell them. Like, this is not, we don't have a clue, but you could maybe help them. And my husband and I both went in and we had just a very open conversation. And I remember that moment thinking, I think this is something. Like, I think we're supposed to do something with this. And it definitely was me more than him. There's no question. And I started from there and I got asked to speak on a stage. I think there was like probably 100 people in the room and it was a 10-minute talk. And I cried on stage the first time. It was messy. It was all these things. But it finished. And what happened, much like you said earlier, I was getting feedback from people saying that was my story that you shared. And so what was happening is that I was seeing how relatable my experience was to so many people. It was helping me to heal, but listening to their stories was giving me fuel. And
Mm.
it was this reciprocal arrangement that was happening. And I was like, okay, maybe I could do something good with this. And for me, I think when you spend so many years living in shame, the thought of sharing and speaking is really scary, but when you start to shift that energy and you get to a space of recognizing that you mean I could do something good with this, like that became a real light bulb moment that I wanted to do something good with this. And so the small stages started to grow and it started to grow into a little bit larger and a little bit larger. And I started to feel a little bit more courage, etc. I shared a couple of collaborative chapters and writing, my own chapter and recognizing that, each time I did a collaborative chapter, I had a different story to share, a different part of the story. And I'm like, there's a lot of story there. Like, I wonder if there's a book there, is where those pieces started to come in. And then from there, I knew I had to start to share online and I didn't know how to do it. Back in like 2015, 2016, social media was extremely curated, right? It was very curated. Your feed, your everything looked, and I wasn't talking about something that was very curated. So I decided to do the complete opposite approach. I challenged myself to start to do Facebook Lives after finishing hot yoga. Now, I don't know what most people look like after hot yoga, but it was not curated.
Yeah.
And so I did it on purpose. My lighting was terrible. I did it like looking like I'm a big sweat bucket, because that was like my experience of the veils are gone and I can just be me. And I was really scared. I'm not going to lie. Those videos pop up on a regular basis, and I literally laughed, going like, she didn't know what she didn't know.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I didn't. And so that's what I started to do. And eventually I got to this space of recognizing, like, I was building my courage, my voice was getting more stronger. And the fear, right? Like, we stop everything because of fear, and fear is a very big blanket word. But it really, in all honesty, most people fear judgment of others.
Mm.
Is really what it is it comes down to, like, what will they think? What will they say? How will they feel about me?
Mm.
And for me, my light bulb moment was that when I had somebody come to my house once and like openly criticize me for what I was doing and how I was handling a situation, this light bulb moment happened where I went, you know what? I've said all of those things to myself. And I just went, wait a minute. Like, I'm so worried about what everyone else is saying when actually the biggest critic I have in the world is me.
Yeah.
So who gives a crap what they're saying? Because I've already said it to myself. And that was when judgment, like, I hate to say it, but for the most part, judgment is not a factor for me, because I mean, no one can say anything worse to me than what I've said to myself.
Yeah.
And that's when it really started to change. And then I started to shift, and the stages started to grow. And I felt this calling in 2016 that I think I'm supposed to write my own book. And this is a really important piece for anybody who's listening. If you have that moment, that drop down, that tap on the shoulder moment, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is such a good idea, and I feel really good about it. It feels like you just got like a tap from the universe saying, go ahead and do this. And then you go and share it with somebody and they think it's the worst idea in the world. It's not their calling, it's yours.
Yes.
It's not their calling, it's yours. You have got to come from yourself. Like, so I was so excited, and I started to tell people, and nobody thought it was a good idea. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's not a good idea. And then I started to think about it more, and I'm like, no, I think I'm actually supposed to write my own book. So for 2017, most of that year, I was very isolated on purpose, because there was so many people were afraid of what I was going to say.
Mm.
How was I going to make people look? You know, was it going to be this tell all about my kids? And it wasn't. It was an incredibly vulnerable story of myself and how I had to grow in order to handle the path that I didn't think was my path. And it was like, what do you do when the plan blows up? Because we all create this plan for our life, and nobody's goes according to plan. And so I really put together this book of what do I do when this happens? How did I find my way through? And again, purpose. It gave me purpose to share that with others. And I just decided that I don't care what anyone else thinks. I am going to put it out. And I look back when I have moments of doubt within myself, and I'm human, it happens. I stop and think, how did I do that in 2017 when everybody thought it was an absolutely ridiculous idea? So that courage is in there. Like, stop looking outward for approval or opinions from others, because you've got it yourself. And so this learning about ourselves. I swear to God, life is a full journey about learning about ourselves.
Yeah.
It really is. And that's how everything just continued to grow, is it grew organically. I grew myself, worked on healing myself. The business didn't come till after. And I'm so glad it didn't.
There's a lot of different quotes that talk about self-discovery, that are talking about the most difficult thing that you can do is the path of self-discovery. No
Hard.
shade ipsum, one of my favorite quotes, know thyself, is about self-discovery, but also know how you're perceived by the outer world, so
Mhm.
that you can kind of tailor yourself to get the desired end state that you're trying to get.
Mhm.
And you know, as you're talking, I'm listening, and I'm like, it reminds me of the saying that God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. Right.
One of my
And
favorites.
so it's like you went through these things, and you were the best person, and that's why you're like, I'm the best person to explain this to people that are probably going through a very similar thing, because I've been through it and I've come out the other side. And so
Mhm.
all these challenges, all this shame that I've been through, that's the best thing I can do, is share that with the world in order to hopefully make an impact and help somebody else get through what I had to get through as well.
Mhm.
And have that massive impact. And I mean, you're right. When you go through self discovery, people always seek for outside out validation, and
Yeah.
you should never try to get validation from anyone else. It's
No.
only from yourself, right? And besides, no one's really going to believe in you until after you've done the work. No one's, that
So
is something within our own society, I believe, today, with social media and the constant, getting likes and comments, and like how many friends and followers you got.
metrics.
Oh, these
Mhm.
metrics, yeah, and it also feeds our dopamine centers, and it makes us happier, like constantly getting these notifications. But it it makes us seek outside validation, right? And it makes us think that we have to get people to believe in us before we do the action, right? Instead of just, no one's gonna believe in you. Even when you first started, people were like, "Why are you doing that? That's dumb." Like, you're gonna get all that negativity, but after you complete it, they're gonna be like, "Dude, I always knew you could do it. I was rooting for you from the sidelines. I knew you could do it."
It's so true. That is so true. Yeah, it's funny because I look at that now, and there are some people I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, that's great. Thank you. Again, you can't take their validation and go, oh my God, that feels so good. Because it's like it can't come from someone else.
Has
It's
come
like,
from self.
thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So I got a question, and this
Mhm,
is more for my curiosity. So, you dealt with substance abuse within
mhm,
your family.
mhm.
When I think of substance abuse, because I had a sister that, one of my older sisters, really heavy in drugs, and like tore up the family for a period of time. So I can understand that with
Yeah.
with it being within my family. But when I look at substance abuse as a whole and like what it can actually do to the brain, there's a lot of other things that can have a very similar effect, such as like
Mhm.
with men and pornography. Okay.
Yep.
With women in social media, especially when they're trying to, like, when they're so obsessed with the way that they look and how they post, and like wanting to get that validation, like it the dopamine that they get, and constantly being on social media and trying to get that, is almost like the same. It's like they're trying to get their fix. They're like an addict. Have you had people that have talked to you about those kinds of addictions, like addiction to social media, addiction to pornography, stuff like that, that have also had a negative impact in life? And how do you correlate those?
Wow, that's such a great question. First off, thank you for sharing with me your family,
Yeah.
because I think like I don't have to go over. This is the other thing. If I can just share, I never have to go very far before I see somebody who is either directly affected or like 1 or 2 degree separation. This is again. I mean, our stories are they connect us. Secondly, yes, I would say I have seen stories come my way, everything from, assault, from sibling assault, from, um, you know, uh, I've seen wives come to me talking about their spouse and pornography and how it's just nonstop. I think that when I say the word addiction, people think of substance. It's not. It's like addiction is anything that is managing, controlling, dictating my day, my energy, my focus, I think it's all the things. I think our phone is like one of the worst, to
Oh
be
yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
It is absolutely one of the worst. And I think that I would ask everyone to always give themselves a moment of self-reflection and recognize like how much is that phone dictating my life and my focus and what I do. And that might be everything down to notifications, right? I heard something the other day that I thought was really funny, that there was a time, and I forgot about this, but there was a time when people were making artists were making a lot of money on ringtones. And
Yeah. I
right?
remember that.
There's ringtones.
I
Now,
remember that.
nobody wants a ringtone. Nobody wants their phone on. They don't want the notifications. And in that, I mean, I think that's huge. I think that's huge. It's a huge growth. But to answer your question, yes, I think that addictions, they come in all different kinds of shapes and sizes.
Mhm.
And you might be looking at it and going, my spouse, my child, my parent I believe they're having addiction with this issue, with this topic. And they very, again, rightfully might be. And you still can't fix or change or manage that until they decide to do something with it. You can be the example, but I do think that it comes in so many different ways or shapes or forms. And when it comes down to it, sometimes we have to communicate from a space of like, you're not me not saying to you like what you're doing is wrong. And it's one of the things I talk about in therapy a lot is like speak from your first person and saying that this is how this makes me feel. This is what I don't like. This is what this is. And knowing that you can still do all those pieces to take the best care of yourself, to speak your word, your truth. And that still might never change that person, because that person has to have a moment of time where the consequences of their choices are so great that it tips them to make a decision to do something differently. I don't think anybody, and this was the perfect storm for us, in all honesty. Like, I'm in Canada, so at the time,
I figured with the oot.
oh,
I heard it earlier. I was like, oh, she's Canadian.
it's so funny, right? We don't even hear it ourselves. People say it to me all the time, and I'm like, I didn't hear it. But the laws in Canada, in the sense that we've done a big disservice, in my opinion, for mental health and substance abuse, in my own opinion. And the thing is that school didn't care, police didn't care, nobody cared what was happening. So the only people who had a problem with what they were doing was mom or dad, right? So if, like, I don't know, like, there's no consequences, there's no change that's going to happen. It wasn't until consequences became part of the picture that they then started to create change. And that really makes me think about human behavior. I don't think anybody changes anything until it's a consequence, until there's a consequence attached to it. And then even then you have to decide, is that consequence enough that I'm going to make a change, or is it not? Like, we get to decide. So I think I just wanted to add that piece when it comes to any kind of addiction or any change that you are looking at creating or helping with someone in your life. There has to come a point where they decide that that's not how they want to do things. And you might make a different decision. I've seen a lot of marriages split. I've seen a lot of couples, and it really comes down to being in very different places at different times, different priorities, different things that are important to them, and somebody making a decision that it's like, that's not how I want my life to be.
Absolutely. So when you started speaking,
Mhm.
and you started to write, if somebody was looking at this and listening to your story and they're like, man, I've got this story that I can help impact, what would be your recommendation to them to basically take a similar path, or the path, everything that you've learned so far? Like, hey, don't do this because I did that. And
Yeah.
there's a pit over here. Like, that's not the other way,
Yeah.
based on everything you learned. Hey, this is where I would go. And this is how I would, take these steps to take your message or your branding to market.
Okay, so this is a fantastic question, and I'm gonna give a bunch of tips.
Okay.
Because I do like to give. I like to make sure that people have some tangible things they can walk away with. First off, you cannot be a victim of your story.
Mhm.
If you are in a victim mindset, which, first off, you're allowed to be a victim. It happens. When really hard things happen to good people, victim mindset's the first place we drop into, but no change happens from there. So I've had many people reach out and say, I want to do this, I want to do this, but they're still very angry. Victim mindset is when you are replaying all the scenarios, you're trying to justify, trying to explain, trying to change. It's still victim mindset. So no change happens there. You have to be deciding to move out of that space. Secondly, you have to be clear on, like, what's the lessons you learned from your story?
Real quick, I want to jump in on victim mindset. I want to amplify that a little bit, because when you decide to take responsibility, the radical responsibility of your actions, what happens is you let go of pointing the finger at other people.
Yeah.
When you truly do it.
Mhm.
So, for instance, when I started taking accountability for my actions, I had this cathartic moment in 2021 when I was going through this personal development journey, and I'm in church, and I'm sitting there, and I was actually repenting. I was praying. I was repenting when they were giving out the sacrament, and I started repenting, and I started repenting about all these things that I had done, and it was all these past relationships that I had like blamed them for doing something crazy, or I blamed them, and I completely removed that and said, you know what, I did these actions, and I started taking accountability. And what happened was that I let go of all the anger and all of the victim mindset that you're talking about. I let go of all of that, but it was like I was able to let go of this weight as well. I took power
Huge.
over it, and it was this very powerful moment that it was like the Holy Spirit was literally in my head saying, no, you got more to repent for. You've done more, bro. Like, like you got more to be apologetic for. You've made more mistakes. And I just kept digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And at the end of it, I felt like so light, and I felt so happy and like healthier. And I didn't have any angst, no bad feelings. I let it all go. And so that victim mindset, you may think I'm not a victim, and it's not that someone's calling you a victim, but if you're sitting there and you're pointing the finger at another person and saying, well, they did this, that's a victim mindset, just so you know. Like,
it is. It is. And it's again, like, no shame, but just recognize no change happens from there. I actually even recorded one of my biggest downloaded episodes was the fact that blame and ownership sit on the opposite ends of the spectrum. So if you want to know where you want to create change in your life, start with where are you blaming someone else? Because if wherever you're blaming someone else for, you're not taking ownership for. And I know people like this is probably one of the most triggering topics ever.
It is.
Because people don't want to, they take it that I'm saying they're at fault. I'm not saying that at all. It's that you can still choose how you respond to what you have, right? As we were still navigating some of these early days, and I got to a space that, when you're dealing with issues like this, I mean, I would be like, as a parent going, you can't talk to me like this. You can't do these things. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, okay, you want to start over, or are you going to leave? Like, which one are you going to have? Because we don't talk like that. Like, and that's like, I don't allow that. That's a different energy, right? That's a very different energy. So I think that's a really important point, is learning that you don't want to hold on to victim mindset anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt
you.
No.
I'm glad you did, because it is a big point to hit home. It is a huge point to hit home, because you might have this dream of writing your book and sharing your story. But if you're coming from that angry space, actually, I even go a step further and I tell people that's the exact opposite time you should ever start sharing, because you will only attract more and more angry people, because they're going to go, oh my God, me too. Me too. I'm like, me too. And all you're going to do is attract that. That's not going to serve anybody. So let go of that. The next thing is really starting to understand, like, what are the lessons that you learn from your story? And sometimes that requires like a big storytelling deep dive and looking at, like, what are those recurring lessons? We all have recurring lessons that we're living over and over. And you start to see that, like, what are you the expert of? What is it that you have lived through multiple times that you could share with someone else how to get through that? And then another piece is that when it comes to sharing your story, and this is not mine, I learned this from Lisa Nichols in 2015, and it saved my life and it helped me when it came to writing my own story, is that you have to be able to share your story. And if there are other people involved in the story, which there always is, then you have to be able to share it from the energy in the space that, as if they were in the room with you, you could still share it. And if you can't do that, you're probably not sharing the right parts. You can't control how they're going to respond, but you can control how you speak. And if you can't share parts of your story without completely crumbling and losing it, those parts are probably not meant to be shared. And so a lot of people who know me will say, like, you're so vulnerable and you share a lot. But the people who know me really well, they're like, she's not even sharing half of the stuff that went on. So you don't have to share it all, is what I'm saying. When it comes to vulnerability, it's like letting people see you and who you are and what you felt and what you experienced, not the details of the story. Because we connect with other humans based on emotions and experiences, not on, like, I don't need to tell you a lot more other than we dealt with substance abuse and it was really ugly. And that almost everybody can go, yeah, I can feel that. I can feel that. So I don't have to share the details of it. So I think that's really important as well. And then from there, where can you reach out to connect with some like-minded people. Because see, here's a funny thing as humans, going back to the first piece I said on judgment, we tend to stop ourselves based on who's in our life right now. Like, what are they going to think? What are they going to say? How are they going to judge us? When actually the people who are going to be impacted the most by your story, you haven't met yet because you haven't spoke up yet. So where can you put yourself in a situation where you can connect with new people? And that might be as simple as a Facebook group, because for me, that was one of the first things my therapist said, go in and start looking for Facebook groups, 2014, 2015. And the first group I went into, there was 100,000 moms. It didn't take long before I'm like, oh, so it's not just me. Like it's not, well, you need to see that lots of people are being affected by your situation, what you're walking through. And so by doing that, I started to, in that group, really, and there's no judgment in this, is just an observation. I started to understand that how did I want to show up and how did I not want to show up? There was a lot of anger, a lot of pain. There's a lot of pain in that group. And I was just like, that's not how I want to show up, because that's a dark hole and I'm going to go down with the ship if I stay in that space.
Yeah.
How do I want to show up? And then start to find a way to stretch yourself to show up in maybe some containers that, maybe feel safer, but they're stretching you a little bit more. I'll tell you, I worked with so many people over the years who have shared their story vulnerably in online in the spaces. And the moment before they hit post, they're scared to death. And when it's done, they're like, oh my gosh, look at how many people I've connected with. Look at all these messages that I get. And I'm like, you're going to save all of those. You're going to put them in a folder in your phone, and they're your reminder, so that when you have doubts about yourself, you're going to go back and look. My story was able to help so many other people, and it could connect with other people. And it's always a big surprise that it actually does go a lot further than you think.
Vulnerability is a superpower.
Mm-hmm. It's a superpower. It's a superpower. Yep, it's a superpower.
And here's why. Here's what people don't. And this is my assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody likes something that they can relate to,
Mm-hmm.
and they like it's like the underdog story, right?
Mm-hmm.
People love superheroes, but they don't follow Superman or like Superman or any other superhero. I always use Superman because he's invincible, right? They don't like it because he's invincible. They like it because in the moments when he is challenged and he's down, how does he rise? How does he get back? And it's those vulnerable moments that he is able to make it through. And usually it's from the content of his character. It's from the good decisions that he makes, right? And so we find pieces of ourselves in those heroes, in those vulnerable moments, which is the same exact thing. When you have that vulnerable moment that you're able to overcome, it's empowering to people to say, wow, I have a very similar vulnerable moment. I can do the same thing. I can make it through. Like, this is what I've been looking for.
Wow.
And they find that commonality to where and you start to attract a lot of people. You start to attract a lot of people that to your message and the power of your message, and you end up helping and influencing a lot of people. And so, being very vulnerable, it is scary. It is very scary, but it makes a massive impact.
It makes a massive, I'm so glad you said that, because I think that I don't think vulnerability gets enough. And I think that you could do a whole episode on vulnerability alone. It's interesting because as humans, this is what we tend to do. So many people will say and send messages and say, like, I just admire your vulnerability. It's like, you're so strong. You're so strong. And I said, it's interesting because you admire vulnerability in me as courageous, but you judge it in yourself as weakness. And it's like, if you're making it weak in your own mind, but you judge it as strength in someone else, like, that's not even giving yourself a fair chance. And vulnerability is like, it is literally, it's the path to connection. Like, it's the only way we can connect is by allowing myself to be seen. And then if I allow myself to be seen, now you allow yourself to be seen and you feel safe, right? So you do that. And that's how we build a connection.
A true connection.
True connection.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big piece, is that I thought I had a lot of connections, but I mean, the connections I have now with the friends that I have now, that's
Surface level, superficial.
Yeah, compared to what it was before, that was like, they were all superficial before. Now it's like deep, meaningful connections. I would take this any day over what I had before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Marsha, Thank you so much for coming on and sharing a little bit about your story and your journey. So for those of you watching, there's a lot of gold nuggets that Marsha was dropping, especially that pathway that she was just that we all those steps that she went over for you to take a little bit of action in your life in order to craft your own story, your own vulnerable story, because everyone has one, and build your brand over it and kind of find a way that you want to craft that message in order to help other people. Naturally, you got to also go through the work too first, because if you're not doing it, you're not going to inspire. As we talked at the very beginning, you can only control your actions, and people are only going to follow you if you're doing the same thing. So it kind of starts there. But in every podcast, I always ask my guest one question at the end. You get to pick 3 people that you want to learn from. You can break bread with, have a dinner, and just pick their brain and get to know anything about their life, their experiences, their business, whatever. Anyone living or alive, anyone in history. Who would those 3 people be?
Oh my goodness. Oh, what a great question. Okay, so I love questions that stump me because I just want to think a little bit deeper. I would definitely pick Brene Brown because I've connected with so many things that she has shared, and it
She's got a
really.
lot of great quotes.
Oh yeah,
A lot of great quotes.
Mm-hmm.
I actually use one of her quotes in my book, my first book I wrote.
Yeah, she's in my book many times, and I honestly can say, like, it was her first TED Talk on vulnerability that I was like, oh, wait a minute, like I can actually do something with this. Like, it was a big eye opener for me.
Yeah.
So I would say I would definitely do that. Wow, this is such a great question. I would probably, I love the comeback stories. Like, I'm such a comeback story person. So, I mean, this is so corny, but I would probably pick a athlete who had overcome something. So, I mean, when I need inspiration, I go watch Rudy. I go watch, like, I do. That's just, I'm a sports person movie. And so I would love to interview somebody like him who was like, how did you actually continue when everyone thought you were crazy? Like, I think there's something about human behavior that is just fun to learn and to understand. And I would interview the artist Pink because I love her energy and her no BS approach to how she shows up. And she just owns her energy in her space that I love and respect that she is. Yeah. So that's who I would pick.
Authentically her. I love that too.
She's so authentically her. And I mean, she's gone through times where she's definitely, her weight's changed, her body's changed. And she's just like, this is who I am at all times. And I think there's something very powerful for all of us to be, it's not hurtful to anyone else. It's just owning who she is. Yeah. And I think there's something so powerful in learning for all of us to learn how to do that. I think the second you do that, you let go of all the baggage that isn't yours to carry, all the stress, the worries, the things that aren't yours. And I think that's actually when you can start to truly step into who you are and what you're meant to do here, and literally be the difference, be the change that you're meant to be.
I love it. That's so good. Those are all 3 unique ones I've never heard. So. That's great. That's great. You passed the test, Marsha.
I passed the test. I mean, I was like, wasn't sure what was going to come out there, but I just, that's what hits me is what I would love to do.
Yeah, I love it. So if anyone wants to connect with you or learn more about you or even like kind of follow your podcast, where are the best platforms that they can follow you and learn more about you and just connect with you?
Beautiful. Thank you for asking. I've made it very easy for everyone because I do have a very long last name. If you go to Google and you start typing Marsha Vanwynsberghe or any social media platform, my website is all Marsha Vanwynsberghe. Everything is, because it's just easier. And my podcast is Own Your Choices, Own Your Life. We are into episode 508, 509 at this point. Oh, and awesome. I know, right? It's crazy. And it is where a lot of people can learn and start. I had somebody message me last week. She's like, I can't be in a space of coaching right now. Like, what would you suggest doing? I'm like, honestly, start connecting with content that lights you up. And she's like, I love the podcast. I'm like, great, then just start. There's 500 episodes. So I'm just saying, for anybody, I will always have that kind of platform available in my business, because when I first started, it was YouTube, podcasts, and books. That's all I could do. And I think that there is a lot of value in having free available content for people. So yeah. Those are the best.
Absolutely. I love doing it too. And it's just, I think it's just a great way to carry your message to a larger and larger audience and kind of help as many people as possible.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And the podcast is wonderful to connect with people, right? Like I look at the people I've connected with all over the world, and I'm so grateful for the podcast for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Marsha. I appreciate you coming on board and doing this podcast with us. For anyone that's watching or listening, do me a favor. We grow by word of mouth. And the best thing that you can do, it takes you 60 seconds. Give us a like, a review, a share. You can share Marsha's content. This helps both of us in order for, especially with the value that Marsha was able to provide in this podcast. And you can also check out her podcast that she just shared earlier. It's also going to be in the show notes. It means the world to us, but probably takes you about 60 seconds. So this has been the Be the Difference podcast. I'm your host, Greg Birch. Until next time, we'll see you.